Hey everyone, and welcome to the MMQB TV. I'm Albert Breer. On my left, from the Dan Patrick Show and the Against the Grain podcast, Andrew Perloff, and former Jets and Ravens linebacker and current co-host of Maggie and Bart in New York City, Bart Scott. Let's get things going with the New York Jets, where Sam Darnold started his second game of the season at home against the Cowboys. He picked apart Dallas, throwing for more than 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. Bart, let's start with you. What does this game mean for the Jets? What does this game mean for Darnold?
Well, really, this was a game about validating what Gase was saying about him being an offensive guru, because he was selling a lot of, he's innovative, the offense is going to look different, but he just had his hands tied behind his back with Luke Falk. Other than the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is the only organization that was on their third quarterback. So we had questions about the offensive line. We had questions about the receivers. Sam Darnold erased all of that. I don't know if this isn't like baseball where, Sam Darnold has a war, but you saw that when they put up a graphic the other day, the team scores 11 more points when he's on the football field. He covered up a lot of the deficiencies of the offensive line. He only got sacked one time. And you're talking about a Dallas Cowboy team that has 2 premier pass rushers in Quinn and Lawrence. He was able to check off. The hot routes came off. The ball came out on time. The big play to Robbie Anderson that he had, the 92-yard pass, he checked off to that. He recognized that they were in a blitz. It was single high safety. He changed the play with Robbie, was able to, maneuver, pump fake. Robbie with the double move, has an explosive play. They get out to a big lead, and, he did just enough in the second half to really win, but he just showed you it's something special about him. And we normally recognize when a quarterback is special, it's usually their second year. We think about Wentz, we think about Luck, we think about Watson, we think about Mahomes and what they are able to do their second year, their elevators. Mm-hmm. Well, he came back and he showed you the difference of what that offense looked with just by inserting one player, how everybody seemed so much better than what they were.
And I thought what was interesting, too, was late in the game, and it probably didn't get a ton of attention, but the way that Adam Gase kept his foot on the gas pedal in the middle of the fourth quarter. They get the ball. They've got the lead. This is a time when a lot of coaches would tuck tail and just say, hey, we're just going to get ourselves to the finish line, right? And they went downfield twice in that drive, wind up getting a field goal out of it. Probably didn't play out exactly how they'd imagined. But I just thought that showed tremendous confidence in a quarterback who hadn't played in over a month.
Okay, but you guys are sort of describing it as if this game is going to be indicative of what's happening next. We saw this game last year. Remember against the Broncos, he blew them out at home. Darnold had a huge game. Then he dipped again, and that's what I'm worried about. Do we know that he's going to take that second-year jump based on one really close game against the Cowboys? And it wasn't a lucky play, but it was a huge play to Robbie Anderson. If you take that out, the Jets' offense was still middle of the road. I think he replaced a really bad quarterback, and you put a serviceable quarterback and see the difference. But is he beyond serviceable? Is he the next level? I'm not sure.
Well, I almost think it's unfair to compare him to like Wentz and Mahomes, though, because we talk about the offensive lines those guys had. Yeah. I mean, Wentz has Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz and Mitch Morse last year. Doesn't have many more. And then you look at what Carson Wentz has: Jason Kelsey, Jason Peters, Brandon Brooks, Lane Johnson. I mean, Sam Darnold's not playing behind guys like that.
But remember what the narrative was before the season started. Everybody who was anybody believed that this guy at the end of the season would be potentially looked upon as a top 10 quarterback in this league. And I think yesterday's performance did nothing to dispute that argument. I mean, you look at what he's able to do. It's not about what he did, it's how he did it, right? Stepping up. It's the awkward arm angles that we saw. It's the throwing the ball across the field. It's the accuracy. And people always give him, say that he doesn't throw the deep ball well. Well, Robbie Anderson, who's a pretty fast receiver, he hit him in stride. So I don't think, you talk about the leadership that he brings as well. It's something special when you look at him. Right now, I would think that, to me, he's a better quarterback than Jared Goff. I would put him above Jared Goff today. Now, when you get to the Mahomes, the Watsons, the Russell Wilsons, the Matthew Staffords, I think he's behind them. But let's just see. Last year, he didn't have any weapons either. Right. Now he has a slot receiver. Look at Jameson Crowder comes back to life. Look at Robbie Anderson comes to life. He able to get some productivity from Demaryius Thomas. Let's just see what happens when Chris Herndon comes back. And listen, they have a great test. It's going to be a great test. We're going to see what he's all about, right? And he didn't shy away from the fact that they're going to New England. He says he's happy that it's New England. He says he wants to play the best. And I think he's going to, really show a lot next week against that defense that, let's face it, has played against some soft competition. Danny Dimes was right there, 7 points away from being able to tie the game up without his top 3 weapons.
Wow. I mean, you did tell us that the Jets were going to beat the Cowboys on last week's show. And I'm dry all week. I heard you sticking with it on your radio show. So, but top 10 seems like a gaudy number. You're right, though. I'm not sure where he stands. Goff and Baker Mayfield. Yep. I do think Darnold's going to take the next step, but those weapons, yes, an improvement. But I think you have the baseline so low for what the Jets are. To be a top 10 quarterback, don't you have to have a more potent offense?
I think.
332 yards after coming back from mono, losing 10 pounds is pretty
At
good.
home,
if that's the rust, I would love to see what he looks like when the rust comes off and he gets his favorite target.
Do you
back
see this as a
in
top
2
10
weeks.
offense, though?
No, I don't. I'm not saying top 10 offense.
But I think Bart's saying he projects to be a top 10 quarterback. Maybe not this year. I think he is. I think one thing that you watch, like he's still sort of raw as a quarterback because he hasn't played the position forever. He's not one of these classically trained guys.
The linebacker.
In a way, he reminds me a little bit of Mahomes because Mahomes is that guy who played multiple sports growing up, who athletically you can tell he knows how to figure things out. Like there's some stuff he got from playing shortstop.
Right.
Darnold was actually a really good basketball player in high school, and he's one of these kids who I think just has a way of athletically being able to figure things out. And I think that's where you see the kind of can-do sort of like way that he plays. Like he just can find a way in certain spots athletically where other guys can't, which I think gives a guy like Mahomes an advantage. And I think you see it with Darnold too, at least early on in his career.
Better quarterback than Dak Prescott.
Baker Mayfield?
Yes.
Wow.
And Allen. Baker Mayfield, his stock is going down. Yeah. And now Baker's seeing what it's like to have, not the great offensive line in front of him. He's really missing Zeitler. He's getting too much pressure.
So Bart put it on the record now. The Cleveland Browns made a mistake by taking Baker Mayfield over Sam Darnold. Okay. And what might be the biggest surprise this season, the Niners remained undefeated after taking out the Rams in Los Angeles. We know this defense is a force in the West, Andrew, but how far do you think the Niners and Kyle Shanahan can take it?
I've been cynical of the Niners just because, I feel like they're a bit of the flavor of the month, but you look at the numbers. Number 2 in rushing on offense, number 4 overall in offense, number 2 in defense behind the Patriots, who haven't really played anyone. I think you could argue the Niners' defense is even better. They are brutal up front. Their pass rush is amazing. I think that's a formula to go really far. I'm buying them now. And I think it's toughness too. George Kittle, in my mind, leads the way on offense because he reminds me of Gronk. Not only will he catch the ball like Travis Kelce, but he will brutalize you on a block. I'm really into this team.
Gronk wish he can run like Kittles.
Yeah.
He's like Gronk in evolution. Now, I'm not saying that he's Gronk because Gronk, I think, is a first ballot Hall of Famer. But he's a guy that once he gets the ball in his hands, the yak is coming because he can pull away from you running the football. But really what separates them as well is they can really get to you and affect your quarterback with 4 defensive linemen. They have two interior defensive linemen, but then they can rotate in and out. They spent a lot of equity, a lot of draft capital on their defensive line, but they got guys that now I can stop you with a 7-man box, and I can rush with 4 and put 7 in coverage, and I can play this cover 3.
Right.
Reminds me a lot of the Seattle Seahawks when they had the Averill and they had Bennett, and they were coming off the edge, where they can continue to pressure you, and then those corners' only job is not to get beat deep, and then you can put guys in all the lanes, and then they went out and got a surefire fire starter, guy plays with his hair on fire, Kawan Alexander, who can go sideline to sideline because you have so much stress on you dealing with the front 4 that you can't even come off your double team to try and get to the linebacker. So they have the sideline to sideline guy that can create havoc.
I saw this number that I thought was really interesting, and this goes into how they built the team. Over the first 4 weeks of the season, they had 15 different players hit 20 miles an hour on the tracker, right?
Yep.
Which was a high in the NFL. You wouldn't think it, but you look at the way they've built their team. It's play fast on defense. So what do they have? They've got athletes everywhere. They've got guys who are fast for their position in almost every spot. On offense, Kyle uses those guys to match up. Obviously, they've got a world-class sprinter out there at receiver. And then the second piece of this, just how they built through the lines of scrimmage. You mentioned all the defensive linemen. Yeah. There are lots of big-ticket items on their offensive line as well. And they've had to manage that, because they have the injury to Joe Staley. Yep. Now Mike McGlinchey's out. They're going to get both those guys back. So I think it's almost like we've talked about New Orleans this way, how they'll get stronger for having not had Breeze over the course of a few weeks. I think you're going to sort of see the same thing with the Niners, where they're going to have to learn to win different ways because they're without those 2 tackles. So once you get those 2 guys back in there, now you're talking about a team that we get to around Thanksgiving, they could really be hitting.
I wonder if they get aggressive, because if they're looking over the landscape, they're saying, why not us?
Yep.
Right? And this is a very young team. I remember going out and doing a financial literacy program with them, and half of their roster was under 24 years of age.
That's crazy.
And so now they're still young, they're still fast, and they're full of energy. But now all they are to me is one premier receiver away. So do you reach out to potentially to Denver and say, hey, is Emmanuel Sanders available? Do you reach out to Cincinnati? Is A.J. Green available? Because the good thing is they really haven't had to pay a lot of these young guys.
Right.
They brought in some high-priced free agents, but a lot of their young guys on the defensive line, they haven't played. So will they take a chance at a rental so that they can make sure that they can have an elite guy that can win one-on-one? Goodwin's a great receiver. He's fast, but he's not reliable. He's speed. His hamstring's always injured. Get a premier receiver, and you really have an opportunity to make some real noise.
And when Kyle's offense has been great, we've seen the dominant X. That's a part of it. He had a dominant X in Houston with Andre Johnson. He had a dominant X in Atlanta with Julio Jones.
2 questions. Is Jimmy G the kind of quarterback who can win a Super Bowl? I mean, you're talking about top 10 numbers-wise. He's nowhere near that. And second, and this is for you, Albert, is Robert Saleh going to last more than a year as
the defensive coordinator?
Is this their one shot? Because it feels like he is a head coach and waiter.
See, but their defense is set up to be sustainable.
Okay.
Right? The program's in place, the young team, the talent is there. It's not like he's going to have to, any defensive coordinator is going to have to really coach guys up. Once the system's going, he leaves. The calls are still there. It just changes from the voice and the message of how the strategy about going about business. You talk about Jimmy G. Jimmy G doesn't have to be great. We can all agree, at least I'm convinced that Jared Goff isn't a great quarterback, right? I would put Jimmy G and Goff right there. So, Nick Foles wasn't a special quarterback. He was a great guy that understood his system. You don't have to be great when you're playing. Listen, this is like a idiot-proof offense, right? And we see the same offense taking place in Minnesota. It's about running the ball. It's about being able to stop you with regular personnel, with view checks coming back. He makes them unique because he's a great H-back, a Delaney Walker type of guy that's strong enough to come through on the leads and the ISOs, but also can exploit other linebackers and safeties in coverage. So I think they have the recipe about being a ball control offense that can take shots over the top because they're full of play action with that heavy run game.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, maybe I'm more sold. But of course you like the defense first run
No,
team. Of course you do, Bart. Who does this remind you of? The old Ravens teams.
But it also reminds me of that Super Bowl team of the Atlanta Falcons that would just run the ball with Freeman and Coleman over and over again and then hit you over the top with Julio. And that's why I say they're just missing that one elite guy that can make you pay.
And I'll tell you what, Kyle said it to me on Sunday night. Like, I talked to him as they were leaving the stadium, and he just sort of explained, like, listen, I understand what I have in this defense. I'm not going to make this about me. This isn't about my ego. I've got a short
Super Bowl is about his ego.
I've got a short.
I kicked the field goal after Julio caught the ball.
But he said to me, I got to shorten games. I got to find a way to make it so we're playing into what our defense is doing. They ran the ball 41 times against the Rams, even though they didn't hit 100 yards rushing. They stuck with it. They were able to convert some third downs. What did that do? That played right into the hands.
Limit the possessions.
It played right into the hands of that defense, which was able to play fast throughout. Okay, moving on to two teams who, well, they haven't been quite as dominant as the Niners this season. On Sunday, in mid-game, the Titans and Dolphins both benched their starting quarterbacks, Marcus Mariota and Josh Rosen. Bart, do you think either of these moves will help these teams scrape together wins at any point the rest of the season?
Well, the thing about, I'll start with Mariota. The thing is, he's not Vrabel's guy, right? And we've heard all the reports in training camp that Tannehill was the better quarterback. He's a veteran. He just hasn't been able to be healthy. So if all things being considered, I'm going to go with my backup if it's close with my starter because I know that Mariota isn't in my long-term future. I'm not going to give Mariota. If I don't know if you're a franchise quarterback and you've been part of the organization for 5 years, then you're not a franchise quarterback. Now, I feel so bad for Rosen.
Yeah.
I feel like Rosen should, after this, it should be sainthood because this team is clearly tanking for Tua.
Yeah.
And he's potentially going to be on his third team in 3 years.
Yeah.
He doesn't deserve that because he's a pretty good quarterback and we don't even know what he is. How can you evaluate him when you sold off every NFL caliber type of talent except for Devontae Parker on offense? You just got rid of your franchise left tackle. So he's going to end up, I would love to see maybe Rosen in place of Mariota next year and get an opportunity there or get an opportunity in Tampa.
Chicago.
Oh, man, because we all know Trubisky is, man.
Like Rosen in Chicago, Rosen in Cincinnati. Like I actually think Josh Rosen still has a chance to be a good quarterback. He has been in two of the worst situations you could possibly imagine with a one-and-done head coach in Arizona where the offensive coordinator got fired halfway through the season. You brought in Byron Leftwich, who had never called a play in the NFL. Right. And then you trade him off to Miami, which is basically a teardown operation. I don't think Miami's trying to win. So,
no. Did you see the 2-point play?
So to answer the question that we started this on, no, I don't think this is going to help Miami win because it's not their intention to win. The Titans are interesting because this is year 4 for the general manager, John Robinson, second year for Mike Vrabel, the head coach. And so much of that roster is in a position where it's like ready to win now, and they've invested in the secondary, and they've invested in the offensive line, they've invested in the defensive line, and there's so many pieces there where it's like either they're getting older or they're going to have to make decisions on guys and their contracts going forward, and you could be starting over at the quarterback position, which is a really tough spot to be in.
Absolutely. I mean, behind all this is next year's quarterback draft. I mean, I know we overhype quarterback, but it looks like a 1, 2, 3 quarterback. Tua, Justin Herbert, maybe Joe Burrow. You could go down. There might be
Jake
5, 6
Fromm,
guys.
like
Jake Fromm,
Beeson.
Jacob Love, Jordan Love, rather, from Utah. So
Jalen Hurts.
Tennessee's drafting quarterback. So if you're drafting a quarterback, you're not committing to Mariota.
Are they, though?
I don't know.
They are.
Because if you feel like your roster is in a position to win right now, and you feel like your job is on the line, and like there could be jobs on the line, if they aren't this year, next year in Tennessee, like wouldn't you not like would you really want to entrust that to a rookie?
And to me, Jalen Hurts is, if you go for a guy like Jalen Hurts, say, okay, well, I'll take a guy later who's not in the top 3. At least right now, we don't think he's in the top 3. You're basically drafting Marcus Mariota all over again.
Right.
You know, a guy that went to Oklahoma to get his mechanics right, a guy that was, you know, the field was wide open, everybody's always open in Lincoln Riley's offense. So do you take a reboot? I mean, Teddy Bridgewater's going to be out there, and he's going to be available next year. And I don't think he's taking a discount to remain with the Saints because we think Breeze has only got a year or 2 left. But how long do you expect Teddy Bridgewater to wait? You know, so Teddy Bridgewater's going to be available next year. I might take a flyer on Teddy B.
I agree too that the Titans have enough pieces. It's a weird AFC this year. You know, you put Tannehill in there. He certainly looked better on Sunday than Mariota. I think they're not out of the playoff hunt at all. I mean, their defense is good. So I think you got to take a shot. Tannehill, minus some really bad sacks on Sunday, looked way better than Mariota. I think he could get something out of him.
Maybe. I mean, it's worth a swing. It's all you got now.
Yeah.
You know, and with Mariota, I think we can all agree, it looks like the wiring's just off, right? Just so many different offensive coordinators.
It's gonna be a great backup one.
He was raw. He was raw coming into the league. Like when you watch him play, it just looks like the thing's just wired wrong right now.
Inconsistent. He has some games where like, oh, there it is, but then it goes away.
It's hard to come back from that at that position, no question. Okay, the Seahawks came back from a huge first quarter deficit to beat the Browns on the road on Sunday. For more on the Seahawks' big road win, our very own Ryan Asselta talked with the News Tribune's Seahawks writer, Gregg Bell.
All right, thanks, guys. As we enter Week 7, there are 5 teams with 5 wins or more so far this season. Despite a 5-1 record, one of those teams seems to be flying under the radar. That's the Seattle Seahawks. For more on the Seahawks, we welcome in Gregg Bell of the News Tribune. And Greg, Seattle is coming off an impressive road win over the Browns in Cleveland. They're 5-1. They're in the midst of their 8th consecutive winning season under Pete Carroll. Have we all gotten so used to this team winning that they're being a bit overlooked this season?
Well, that's some of it, Ryan. The other part of it is we're out here in South Alaska, so the rest of the country really doesn't notice us until January in the playoffs. The one constant from the Super Bowl teams into now is Russell Wilson. He's playing as well as he ever has, probably the best of his career, his 8th season. He's the best quarterback in football right now, 17 touchdowns, 14 in the air, 3 rushing, and no turnovers, no interceptions. He's one of only 4 guys to have a plus 100 passer rating, Ryan, in each of his first 6 games of the season. Some guys named Brady and Rodgers and Carson Palmer are the others. And really, that's the difference in every game is the Seahawks have the decisive advantage. They have the best player in the world right now at the most important position in the sport. And despite their offensive line problems, pass protecting and injuries, despite their fumble problems, their penalties, the lack of a pass rush, Russell Wilson proves to be the decisive player in the fourth quarter of every game.
Yeah, let's talk more about Wilson. You mentioned he's in the midst of really another MVP caliber season here. You mentioned it there. You wrote that right now in every game, Seattle has the best player at the NFL's most important position. You mentioned the stats. No interceptions, 72% completion percentage right now. Is Wilson the MVP of the NFL right now?
Well, they don't give the award in October because there are a lot of guys who've had great Septembers in October. They give that award out in December for how teams play. But if he keeps this up, obviously, yes. He's the most valuable guy to this franchise, of course. $140 million tells you that. But Ryan, where he's excelled is he now masters the offense better than the offense coordinator, the play caller. Brian Schottenheimer in his second year here after joining Seattle in 2018. Wilson knows the offense more intricately than Schottenheimer does. So when something happens like in Cleveland, when his helmet headset went out in the third quarter and the Seahawks were down, Wilson is so masterful. He just took the offense by himself and said, okay, we're going no huddle. I'm calling the plays. 7 plays, 58 yards, and a touchdown to Jerron Brown later. The Seahawks had their first lead of the game. That's the mastery level he's at now. And that makes him so instinctive. He already was instinctive. He already was escaping pressure and making plays improvisationally. But now he's so intricately woven into what Pete Carroll wants, what Brian Schottenheimer is about to call. It makes him even more impossible to defend. You take away one thing, he goes and gets the other. You rush him with 5, he beats the 5, and now he can get outside and extend plays and find a guy open. And if you cover everybody, he just runs up the middle for the first down. Instead of throwing the ball away, he might run for 5 or 6 yards outside containment. So instead of 2nd and 10, it's 2nd and 4. It's those kind of plays that have made him very tough to defend and why he's the most valuable player, certainly in the Seahawks organization right now in the NFC West, if not the NFL.
Tell us about his leadership style, Greg. He's played with a lot of different teammates over his 8 seasons in the league. How's he able to rally different type of players, different type of teammates on offense year after year?
Well, that's an interesting question, Ryan, because his personality is he's a company guy. He is all in with the Seahawks, with what Pete Carroll wants, what the general manager, John Schneider, wants. But if you're getting paid $140 million, you better be all in with the organization, right? So there are other players on the team that aren't quite as all in. Doug Baldwin, for instance, Marshawn Lynch, on defense, Earl Thomas and Michael Bennett. Yet Wilson's personality is such that he can rally them as well with, he's got an infectious optimism. And the bottom line is the reason he can rally guys that maybe not have bought into the program as he is he wins. And he's got a ring. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. He's the only quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl in Seattle. And that carries the day. And for guys that maybe not are as company guys as he is, the leadership is by example. And they can look, the proof is in the pudding that if they follow what Russell Wilson says and does, they're probably going to succeed and they're going to win. And they're all about Super Bowl rings, and that's Russell Wilson right now. That is really the bottom line, Ryan, as to why people follow him. He's done it. He's proven. And right now, if you're not following Russell Wilson, you're not going to be with the Seahawks that long.
Yeah, you talk about the positivity, optimism. Let's talk about Pete Carroll. That's his personality you could describe as well. Now in his 10th season in Seattle. From what you've seen, Greg, has he changed at all over his stretch of a decade as head coach of the Seahawks?
He has, Ryan. He has become even more player-friendly, if that's possible. You talk to guys at USC, ask Reggie Bush how friendly he was, and Leinart, guys like that. He's become even more so in Seattle. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, he instituted a rule that if the Seahawks win a road game, the veterans get the coaches' first-class seats, and the coaches have to go back and coach class. If you don't think that's a big deal for a 350-pound DJ Fluker to get to sit in first class on a 5-hour flight home from Cleveland, that's a big deal. And the players, after they win a road game, are screaming first class. They love it. And that's a change he did in the last 4 or 5 years. I asked him yesterday where that came from. He said, I just came up with that a few years ago as an incentive. He has a players' council that he leans on heavily, of veterans players. Russell Wilson and KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner are on it now, that help him form some of the policies he has. He lets players have their own voice, as you saw with Doug Baldwin and Michael Bennett and Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas, sometimes to the detriment of the team, but to the advantage of the player. He has a player's first reputation around the league. Free agents want to come out here, the winning culture, and the fact that he lets players be themselves. All of that combined, I could see him coaching for another 5 years or so. He told me once he wanted to coach till he was 74 years old, Marv Levy, George Halas type of stuff. He now says he looks at it every couple years and reassesses. He has 2 years left on his contract out here. The fact that Paul Allen passed away and Jody Allen took over and really kept the status quo at the top of the organization means he's still, Pete Carroll can be here for as long as he wants to. And there's no reason to think he's slowing down right now. I mean, the guy plays rap music, blaring, and has Bill Russell guests in his team meetings. He has free throw shooting contest. He's the same guy he was when he was 50-some. Now he has a Super Bowl ring behind it and a franchise that has totally bought into his program.
Yeah, he'll be 74, still looking like he's 54 on the sidelines,
Yeah,
I
right.
bet, in Seattle there. Last thing, defensively, the Seahawks pass rush kind of seems to be the Achilles heel right now. 26th in the league in sacks. They haven't had a sack over the last couple of weeks. Does the team feel like this is an issue that needs to be addressed?
It's their fatal flaw, Ryan. It could be the thing that keeps them from getting deep in the playoffs or even possibly making the playoffs. They added Jadeveon Clowney. They added Ziggy Ansah. And it hasn't gotten any better. They have 10 sacks, as you mentioned. Not only that, they haven't hit the quarterback in 2 games. You have to go back 3 games to Kyler Murray in Arizona last month, the last time they've even hit a quarterback. No quarterback hits 15 through 6 games. The only time they hit Baker Mayfield in Cleveland on Sunday was when Clowney got a roughing the passer penalty. Teams are getting the ball out quickly on them, yes. They're not running as much, although I think the Ravens this week will test that with Lamar Jackson. But they aren't affecting the passer. And it's going to be an issue later in the season. They want to play more base 4-3 defense than they have this year. But now they brought Michael Kendricks more on blitzing at linebacker, for instance. And if they're going to have to devote assets to blitzing to help that front four, that's going to hurt a secondary that's still young and is still going to be tested. Simple math says they want to keep 7 back in defending and have the front four rush. The front four is not getting home. They get Jaron Reed back this week off the 6-game suspension that ended on Sunday. He had 10.5 sacks last year. That should help, but you would think Clowney and Ansah would have more than 1 sack each through 6 games, and that's where they're at right now. And until that changes, that could be the thing that keeps the Seahawks from going to where they want to go this year.
As you mentioned, Seahawks with a very big test this week. They'll host the 4-2 Ravens in Seattle. Gregg Bell of the News-Tribune. Greg, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for your time, Ryan.
All right, now let's send back over to Albert, Andrew, and Bart.
And now it's the return of everyone's favorite segment, Andrew Perloff's 3-step drop. Andrew, take it away.
All right, I'm going to give the NFL, the National Football League, a mulligan. We're going to let them change 3 things if they want to, and I'm going to put it to the little blue panel commission right here. Let's start with reviewing pass interference. They've overturned 7 of them this year, 0 in the last 2 weeks. If the NFL could have a mulligan, would they not institute that rule that you can review pass interference?
I don't think that they would institute it now based on what we've seen.
Yeah.
It's turned into a public relations nightmare for them. There was a play in the Giants-Patriots game the other night where Golden Tate got absolutely mugged and they didn't call it. And like, I don't know about you, Bart, but it almost feels to me like this is a declaration of war by the officials against everyone else.
Yeah.
Like, where it's like, you know what, you put this on us, screw you.
Right.
Unless there's a dead body on the field, we are not going to overturn these calls. I don't think the officials really wanted to be involved in these sorts of judgment calls to begin with, and it sort of feels to me like they've taken things into their own hands, which has created a bigger mess.
Yeah.
And so one way or the other, I think this was always seen by a lot of people at the league level as sort of a step towards eventually getting to the point where you have a sky judge.
Yep.
And maybe this is the officials sort of swinging back and saying, we're not going to let that process go down so easy.
Yeah, and we're getting over officiating, right? I mean, watching that Dallas and Jets game yesterday was painful. 6 penalties in a row. Even Nance was like, come on, man. It was some egregious calls there. You can pass interference, illegal contact, holding. You can call literally every play. I think the rule was really put in for the egregious, right? For maybe the play against the Jets yesterday with Witten and Jamal Adams, right?
Yep.
And of course, we know it was put in because of the Rams and the Saints.
Yep.
So I don't think they're going to really change it from anything ticky-tack because they're not going to correct themselves as the game, because you want to still have the human element in the game. But if it's something where somebody's pulling a shirt and they miss it, or they're like grabbing somebody, holding them, they're not going to change it, because they're going to allow the players to kind of hand fight a little bit. And I think, the longer we go and the public outcry about how slow the game is, how choppy the game is because of all the penalties, I think they're going to, the refs are going to swallow some of their whistles. But that's like asking your mom to apologize to her kid when she's wrong. If I didn't call it on the field, then I'm not going to overcorrect myself and say, no, I was wrong and I did it wrong in the first place. When I look at it, I'm going to say, you know what, so that's not that bad.
Well, two things here, Andrew, and I think that this is really interesting. Like, if you're the officials, these would be reasons why you would push back. Number one, I think there's the reactionary nature of all of this. And most of the rules changes that we've seen over the course of the last 10 years, it's event and then reaction, right? Like, so Des Bryant, catch rule. Nickel Roby-Coleman, pass interference reviews. And you can go right down the list of all the different rules changes, and there's always some event. It's not about getting it right. It's about fixing what was a mess for the league, right? Absolutely. So I think that if you're an official, that's probably pretty annoying, that like you're going to have to learn to re-officiate something or officiate something in a different way each and every year when you've trained your eyes to see this game that moves at 1,000,000 miles an hour a certain way. It's just, it makes your job harder and harder. The second piece of it's what you got to, which is the human element. And you wonder if there's a little bit of protectionism over their jobs here, and that like they don't just want this to be like sort of a robot operated like deal. Like they feel like the human element's important because they're the humans who are on the field, right? So I think that those two things could be factors. Number one, the league, of course, and I think we can all agree on this, has been way too reactionary, and every single little PR flare-up they have, they combat it with a rules change. And then number two, just taking the human element out of it could eventually mean taking the humans out of it.
Yeah.
Well, it's
in tennis. We see maybe Major League Baseball flirting with the automated strike zone with the robots and things like that. And eventually technology is going to enter our game as well. It already has with the line that goes across the placement. Who knows, next they'll be putting a chip in the ball to see if it actually crossed the line of scrimmage before somebody got down.
They were like, yes, let's definitely do that. By the way, it's infectious. It's not just pass interference, although they didn't overturn Kyler Murray's first down at the end of the Falcons, which prompted Joe Thomas to say replay is dead. And
that was crazy. Like where you looked at the ball, the ball was over here, the first down marker's here. I think it's clear as day. And again, that's why I'm saying like it makes you wonder if this is sort of an effort, like a little bit pushback of the officials. They just did their new CBA.
I know.
They feel empowered.
They
to
also
sort of push back a little bit on what the league's trying to feed them.
They made a big mistake by not wrapping up Dean Blandino, who actually kind of invented this replay system in El River. I'm just saying it's a bit of a drop. Okay, I don't want to dive in too much into that. Number two, does the NFL want a mulligan on moving the Chargers to a soccer stadium in Los Angeles? What do you guys think?
When is the stadium ready?
Next year.
And they're sharing it.
You saw the game last night. It was a Steelers home game in Southern California.
Well, we know that the Chargers fan base is still in San Diego, and they're not going to travel up that far to support their team. They're still bitter about it. They have to figure some things out. We know the Steelers, the Cowboys, they travel well, and it's always going to be tough because they're almost like a team without a home, and it's tough because even with the Rams went to the Super Bowl last year, and we saw that they struggled. California is different, man. Just like Miami, just like New York. I mean, New York brought on the Super Bowl, and the city didn't even blink. Usually the Super Bowl comes to town, they shut down. LA's the same. It's so much entertainment going on that nobody's going to come and see a team that they think is a foreigner.
So here's the shame of it to me. San Diego's a great market. Great city. It's not a small market. Like it's somewhere, I think it's ranked somewhere between 10 and 15. There are people there. Right. Like, and there were people who are passionate about the Chargers. The NFL liked the market. The NFL can put Super Bowls there, for Christ's sake. I mean, I think everybody loves the idea of having Super Bowls back in San Diego again, right?
It was beautiful in San Diego.
The biggest issue was that they went in and they asked for the public money. And in California, it just wasn't going to happen. Right. And I think the real regret here might be not working something with ownership, where at the very least, maybe you get the Spanos family, which they couldn't afford to build their own the stadium on their own, in California, where it costs more than it would cost almost anywhere else. Get a Mark Zuckerberg, get a billionaire in there to buy a piece of the team, and fund the stadium.
Yep.
And you put a stadium in San Diego, right?
20%.
Put a roof over it. You've got Final Fours there. You've got concerts there. They would be printing money if they could do that. And it's unfortunate because I think so much of this came down to, okay, well, we've got this ownership group who's been a good ownership group, who's been a loyal ownership group to the league, right? But they don't quite have the capital to build a stadium on their own.
Right.
So what are we going to do? Are we going to try to solve the problem creatively and maybe build out the ownership group in a different way or convince them to do that? Or are we just going to go hat in hand to the government and try to get a handout?
Right.
What did the league do? They went hat in hand to the government, tried to get a handout. That didn't work, and now they're in this mess of a situation. And the crazy thing, if you think about it, who made out in all of this is the Raiders. Raiders got a free stadium from Nevada. Right? The Raiders got a free stadium from Nevada. They've got a passionate fan base. They're not going to be dealing with this in Vegas. It's just, to me, it's like, even the Rams, like you saw that game yesterday, even the Rams are having trouble building their fan base. It just feels like the Chargers have no shot. Where are the fans going to come from?
USC, that's USC's country. That's a college town.
It's a baseball town. It's a Lakers town. They're very fickle fans. There's
Don't even
so
like
much
the
to
Clippers.
do. No, they don't like the Clippers.
The other thing is, like, I think the other part of it too is, like, you've conditioned fans, like, so we all sit at home, like, the in-stadium product has, like, slowly gotten better. The at-home product's going like this, right? Like, getting better and better and better. And these fans in Southern California have been conditioned to watch from their couch for the last 20 years.
There you go.
If you've only been watching the game that way for the last 20 years, like, would you get up and schlep to the stadium and pay X for parking and pay X for tickets, or will you just do what you've done forever and just watch all of the games at home?
That's why teams, I believe, are in the future are going to have online betting from inside the stadium.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where you can, and they're going to have a big red zone monitor up where guys can monitor from the teams. I remember going to the Knicks, and when they redid theirs, they have monitors there where you can watch actually other games while you're watching a live game. I see that being the future of the fan experience. When you're able to go to a game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, too, in Vegas because they're actually going to be competing against the sports book for the fans' dollar on Sunday. That tells me eventually, once they figure that out, it's going to be there's going to be a sports book in that Vegas stadium pretty soon.
I mean, if you have a team like the Knicks, you better watch another team. That's all I'm saying. My last one, the longer extra point. Now, we don't talk about that much. I think everyone's okay with that, but Falcons, Cardinals, on Sunday came down to Matt Bryant missing it. He looked heartbroken on the sideline. Now, the numbers have been consistent since they instituted the rule, but field goals are actually way down this year. I wonder if kickers are losing a little confidence.
Of course.
They're at the lowest point since 2003. Last year they were up, which is interesting to me. Do we like the way this is going?
I'd be interested to hear your feeling on this, and you probably just think they're like weak-minded kickers, right? But what I have heard from some kickers is that they used to use the extra point to work out the kinks, right? So, like, if you yanked a 40-yard field goal or you sliced a 45-yard field goal and something wasn't quite right, like, you would go back and you would get to work on whatever in a game situation on the extra point, right?
Yeah.
And it was like just an opportunity to kind of like, okay, like, I got to do this a little bit different. I got to do that a little bit different. So now you're going from having that to it's actually a real field goal.
Yeah.
There's real pressure. Like, it's just, you can see where it sort of messed with a lot of guys, like where this used to be like sort of their practice round, and now it's a real kick. And so not only is there the pressure of hitting the extra point, which can screw everything up if you miss it, there's also the fact that the chance you had to kind of work on your misses, any little problem you had with your game in a game situation was suddenly gone.
See, what happened is, it separates the good from great kickers, right? Because you got to be mentally dialed in. The extra point when I played was just an afterthought, right? Because it was just, you can kick the ball so hard it didn't matter. The ball didn't have time to react to really, unless you really like shanked it, right? The ball didn't have the opportunity to react. So you can just kick the ball. You remember how hard they used to kick it, and it's just boom, you hear it and it goes right in. But what happens is now when you move it back, now the ball has more time for the revolutions and for the spin of the ball to be able to go left or right. So now kickers have to really concentrate on it, and now it's a real play. I mean, I think it's great for the NFL because it used to be, okay, touchdown, we already know it's automatic 7. I'm going to the kitchen to go get food. Now you're engaged because now coaches have to make real decisions. Do they go for 2? And they're going to the analytics and saying, you look at Harbaugh the other week when they were going against Kansas City. It's like, well, the analytics said, hey, we probably should go for 2. And they have one of the best kickers in the game. You talk about automatic.
You have Justin Tucker's
It was like 90% on field goal, damn the extra point. So, I really love it because it forced the kickers to have to work for every kick. And it's not asking them much. What did they move it back? 7 yards?
It was more than that. It was
They're at the
30,
15 now, yeah.
It's a 35-yard
13
field goal.
yards or something, yeah.
It's a 35-yard field goal. It would have been an 18-yard field goal before, so it's moved back 17 yards.
Hey, well, that's great. I love it. I love it.
No sympathy for the kickers from the
Yeah,
line.
Matt Bryan, grow up.
Well, if you picked the Falcons last week, you might not have loved it.
What do you think?
I picked the Falcons last week, and I want real football players like Bart Scott to determine the winner, not kickers. But if I had picked the Cardinals, then I'd be okay with it. It is exciting.
Invest in your kickers. Just imagine if the Jets early in the season would have brought in Myers. They wouldn't have these issues.
Is that why the Dolphins went for 2 at the end of the Redskins game?
We knew what that was all about.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I do like it being a real football play. Thank you, Andrew. Now let's take a break from football reality and take a look into the world of fantasy football with SI's fantasy expert, Bill Enright.
Hey, I'm SI fantasy analyst Bill Enright here to bring you the guys you should start and the guys you should sit on the bench heading into week number 7 of the NFL season. And remember, we don't give you the obvious ones. We dig deep here on the Monday Morning Quarterback. So let's start off with a quarterback, Jared Goff of the Los Angeles Rams. I know they're on a 3-game losing streak, and Goff just had 3 fantasy points in week 6. But he gets a cupcake matchup against a terrible Falcons defense that has allowed 4 straight quarterbacks to score over 20 points. Yes, even Marcus Mariota had over 20 points against the Falcons. Over to running back Frank Gore of the Buffalo Bills, the ageless wonder. He's coming off a bye, and Devin Singletary is still not ready to take over for Frank Gore. They are playing against a Dolphins defense that is allowing the 2nd most rushing yards and the 2nd most fantasy points, according to our partners over at Fantasy SP. Let's go to a wide receiver where I'm looking at Michael Gallup of the Dallas Cowboys. With Amari Cooper banged up, look for Dak Prescott to rely on the 2nd-year wide receiver. The Eagles just got torched for 4 touchdowns by Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs and are giving up 191 yards to wide receivers. Gallup should have a field day against that Philly secondary. A tight end this week, Jared Cook. Ride him while he's hot. I had him on the list last week. I have him again. Back-to-back games with a touchdown, and the Bears are allowing 6 catches and 64 yards to opposing tight ends. So there are your startums. Now let's move over to the guys who should be riding the bench this week. The sit-ems for a quarterback, Carson Wentz. He had to throw 40 times last week just to get him to 306 yards. It was his first 300-yard game since week 1. His opponent in week number 7, the Dallas Cowboys, they're allowing just an average of 240 yards and just 11 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, according to our partners at Fantasy SP. How about a running back that you don't want to play? That's Kerryon Johnson of the Detroit Lions. Just 1 running back has scored against the Minnesota Vikings this season, and that was way back in week 2. Minnesota has held their opponents to less than 90 yards in 4 straight games. A wide receiver you don't want to start, that's Robbie Anderson of the New York Jets. Listen, I get it. He had a monster game against the Cowboys in week number 6, 125 yards and a touchdown off 5 catches. But the Patriots have the best passing defense in the league. They've allowed just 1 touchdown to opposing wide receiver all season long. And last, the tight ends, Jack Doyle, Eric Ebron. I don't want any part of this Colts tight end group in week 7 as they take on the Texans defense that is shutting down opposing tight ends. They're allowing just 3 catches for 28 yards per game. Ebron and Doyle, they're going to cancel each other out. And that's your week 7 start 'em, sit 'em. Good luck with your matchups.
It's now time for our way too early picks of the week that we will not be held to. But before we do that, just for Andrew's benefit, we're going to take a look back at how we did last week. Andrew, after all of that trash talk, you went 1-3.
I blame the officials.
Bart, you went 3-1, and I went a perfect 4-0 on my picks. Changing of the tides here is I'm working my way back up to 500. All right, our first game of the week, Thursday Night Football, is the Chiefs, favored by 3.5 over the Broncos in Denver. Mahomes has not looked like himself recently. This line feels a little low to me.
Yeah.
Can the Broncos cover?
Well, we saw KC go into Denver. You know, Denver, you got that mile high thing on a Thursday night. Kansas City has looked anemic. All my logic actually points to the Broncos, but there's just absolutely no way I'm picking against Patrick Mahomes against this Denver team. Mahomes against Flacco. So we saw the Broncos look good against Tennessee, and Philip Lindsay play really well. But are they going to be able to do that and outscore Mahomes? I feel like at a certain point, Andy Reid is going to get in there and Eric Bieniemy, and they're going to figure some things out, and they're going to cover that.
Well, Mahomes, you see him continue to point to his ankle. He's hurt all the time. And we've seen the blueprint, right? The blueprint is to play keep away. Play keep away, dink and dunk, run the ball. You can take a guy like Lindsey and dink and dunk. You can pick up pivotal third downs with a guy like Emmanuel Sanders. I think it's going to be a lot closer than what people think. I think that Joe Flacco is starting to find some type of idea about how he wants to go and being able to take care of the football. Traveling team, in division game, they're always tough. I don't care what division you're in. I think I might ride with the Broncos and just lay it 3. Take the 3.
I want to take the Chiefs. It seems like way too low a number to me.
Yeah.
It just seems like 3.5. And, you know, it's one of those weird things where it's like Vegas knows.
They do.
Like last week with the Saints and the Jaguars.
And there's something up here where that number seems like artificially low. Do they have like Pat Mahomes, like ankle x-rays or MRIs or something? I'm not sure what's going on. I'm going to stick with the Chiefs just because it's hard for me to see Mahomes not bouncing back from, I think, like a couple of weeks that he's probably not real proud of. Like a couple of weeks that probably he doesn't see as him. And it was the ankle against the Colts. Yesterday Sunday he didn't look quite right against the Texans.
Right.
But I think it's a little hard to point to the ankle there. To me, it's a short week. The adrenaline gets going a little bit. I'm going to take the Chiefs to cover and look pretty impressive in going into Denver.
You worry about the
beating
defense? The Chiefs' defense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, me too. I'm thinking the Chiefs too.
That's what I think I'm worried about.
I don't feel great about it.
Yeah, I don't feel great about the Chiefs' defense either. Okay, our next game on Sunday, it's the Ravens traveling out to Seattle to face the Seahawks. Seattle's a 4-point favorite. Does this number seem to be right, all things considered, with how Seattle's playing, Bart?
I think it's about right. I think, Baltimore going all the way across the country, different time zone. The Seattle Seahawks are a totally different team at home than they are on the road. Mm-hmm. They're almost damn near unbeatable there. I just think with Ziggy on one side, Clowney on the other side, Wagner's a great sideline to sideline. Linebacker, I think that they can contain Lamar Jackson and make him beat him from the pocket. I just don't know if Lamar can do that. If they want to make it a physical game, Seattle's built to play that rugged, nasty game. Russell Wilson thrives in playing in these 12 to 19 to 20 yards, 17 to 14 type of games, and he excels later. I think right now, Russell Wilson is a much more polished version of Lamar Jackson. I think Russell Wilson is who Lamar Jackson should inspire to be. Understanding when to utilize your legs when your team needs you most, but making sure that you're in self-preservation mode so that you can continue to coach this team. I get concerned with Lamar Jackson running the ball that many times, especially if he wants to run against a linebacker like KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner, who once they get there can put a hurting to you.
So you're taking Seattle.
Taking Seattle cover.
Okay, it's interesting because Seattle's beaten everybody except for one handy win. They win by 1 point. They've won by 1 point twice. They won this game by 4. They won by 2. Over some not good. They keep teams close, and then Russell Wilson wins the game. But the Ravens, I think, are a little bit of hype right now because that Lamar Jackson versus the Bengals linebackers, that was unfair. The Bengals should have called the game immediately.
Yeah.
He ran for 152 yards. I agree with Bart that I think the Seahawks are going to look at that film and be like, you know what, you're going to have to beat us with your arm. I would triple team Mark Andrews, the tight end. And
the Earl Bowl, too.
Yeah. I honestly, I do. It feels like the Seahawks are close in every game, but I'm not sure Baltimore travels in this situation.
This is a fascinating matchup, all right? Because I do think Seattle is as capable as anybody of keeping Lamar Jackson in the pocket and forcing him to beat them with his arm. And the reason why is just what Bart pointed out, those linebackers can run. Yeah. Having KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner and Michael Kendricks.
And Ziggy, man.
I mean,
Ziggy is.
They have guys who are big and long and can reach and pull guys down, good open field tacklers. And so I think that could be a problem for the Ravens. Yeah. I do think, and I'd be interested to hear your take on this, I do think that this is the sort of test that John Harbaugh and Wink Martindale want for their defense.
Yeah.
And that typically has been a tough rugged, mean Baltimore defense. And I think there are some questions internally about where that is right now, and whether or not they feel like losing Terrell Suggs, losing C.J. Mosley, losing Eric Weddle had taken some of the teeth out of the defense. So I think going up against Chris Carson and Rashad Penny and Russell Wilson and a physical Seattle offense, I think is going to give them the sort of test to see where they're at right now.
They have to go into this game like this is Pittsburgh week.
Yeah.
And understanding that, this is going to be a game where this team likes to have rush attempts higher than anybody, right? They led the league in rushing last year. And Schottenheimer is a guy that's going to take shots when he gets the opportunity to, but they, at the root of it, they want to run the football. They want to set up that play action, and those same run plays that are runs in the first half and the third quarter are shots in the second quarter, and then coming out in the third quarter, getting you to bite up a little bit. And we're starting to see, I think, just a little bit the absence of Tony Jefferson, being there, trying to find somebody that can allow Earl Thomas to be like that loose cannon and be able to be close to the line of scrimmage. Tony Jefferson is a guy that they were interchangeable because their skill sets were similar. They're starting to struggle. And listen, it's a little bit of a group text amongst the alumni saying, hey, man, we don't play football like this.
Wow.
We need a little bit more grit. You know what I'm saying? Wow. We need to set the edges in Baltimore. No Dwight Freeney. Get up the field. You guys got to get down there and haze them or something. Yeah. We don't play the run on the way to the pass. We set them edges.
That's interesting. You heard it here first. Group text going on with the Ravens.
Who's on that?
The Ravens defensive alumni.
Double secret probation.
Oh man,
I need to see who's on that group text. Okay. Then on Sunday Night Football, we got the Eagles at the Cowboys. God, it's gonna be tough to top that. The Cowboys are a 3-point favorite at home, coming off of their third straight loss. The NFC East has not been great of late. But can the Cowboys get things back on track and cover against Philly, Andrew?
Well, I have a group text. It's with my dad and my cousin Eli, who are huge Eagles fans. And this game defines
maybe
everything.
Not as animated as
group text. Or as tough. There's no haloti nadas in my family. But this is like a Super Bowl to the Eagles because, the division's on the line in some sense. The Eagles and Cowboys are fighting for it. But Philly-Dallas is always a big game. That's like the last real rivalry in the NFL to me. And I think both teams are going to be up for it. I'm going down to, I have, with all the injuries, I have an even playing field. I'm saying Carson Wentz is a little bit better than Dak Prescott. I'm taking the Eagles.
And this, to me, all rests on the shoulders of Amari Cooper or the thigh of Amari Cooper.
Yeah.
Because if he's able to be available, we saw what Kirk Cousins was able to do throwing the ball down the field. Zach Brown had to eat his words after the game. He didn't even want to talk about Kirk Cousins. But, I feel like that, the pressure to me is on Dallas because losing 3 games in a row, losing to an 0-4 Jets team, even though we know that team wasn't really an 0-4 team with Sam Darnold maybe a little better. But they got embarrassed. And, they were down in every game that they've lost, they're down early, and they're digging themselves out of a hole. You think about the Green Bay game, the interceptions early, then they're fighting and scrapping to come back. This is on Dak. We were talking about business as booming early. In the first 3 games, he was making money. Well, now he's losing money.
Yeah.
And, Carson Wentz, he's a better quarterback in an elevator than Dak Prescott. So he's seen this. He's starting to slowly start getting some of his weapons back. So it's funny that the game, to me, rests on who has a healthy deep threat.
Right.
If Deshaun Jackson comes back, I'm going to Deshaun Jackson because that means Awuzie is going to get worked because you got to try and put somebody else on Alshon Jeffries. If Cooper's back, then I'm going to advantage Dallas because their whole secondary is reeling.
Let me ask you this, Bart. You see what Doug Peterson said.
Yeah.
A, was that a guarantee? And B, if you were a player on the other team, how would you take it?
I mean, you got to take it personally. And to me, that's just the juice that Dallas needs because their morale is down.
Right.
I mean, you got Jason Garrett putting the hands up and nobody's dapping him up. Kellen Moore was the boy wonder, the next man in line if Garrett is out of here and all of a sudden the league gets caught up to him. We're going to see if they can make the adjustments. This game isn't about throwing a punch. It's about can you take a punch and then can you throw the proper counter back. And we're going to see if Jason Garrett, because I tell you what, Jason Garrett is coaching for his NFL future.
Right.
He'll be back in coordinating school if the Dallas Cowboys fall short of winning a couple of games in the playoffs.
What would Rex or John Harbaugh or Brian Billick have done with that?
Oh, with that guarantee? Oh, man.
With
you should have saw what happened when Jason Garrett turned down a job. Rex cried in the meeting. Are you kidding me? This guy doesn't want to coach these guys? He doesn't want to coach you? You guys are a great team. Man, we shut that. Listen, that was the last game we went into Dallas. That's like the last game ever in there.
Yeah.
LeBron McClain. LeBron McClain ran for like, our fullback ran 280-yard passes. We threw trash cans all over the place. Like, this would be like Armageddon. Somebody would have to die.
I think that was a Saturday night game, right?
Yeah, we
were pretty fired up.
We threw trash cans.
Shut it down, Bart. Shut it down.
It's like, blow this piece of crap up. Hated that little crown in the middle of the field.
This has been a good, lively pick segment. I've enjoyed this. Lastly, guys, give me one line that you love this week.
I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm going to pick the worst team in the NFL. Miami Dolphins are going to Buffalo, but it's 17 points in a divisional game. 17 points. Mm-hmm. That's huge. Now, I don't know how they're going to do it, but Miami is going to find a way to keep this close. Because you think about Miami comes out, they play tough, then they get blown out at the end. I don't think the Bills have the offense to really put up too many points. As long as Josh Rosen doesn't give them too many points defensively, I think Miami.
Magic.
Yeah, or whoever comes in. I feel like you should be. If you can't cover 17 points in a divisional game, what are you doing in the NFL?
For me, man, I'm looking at this game between Kyler Murray and Danny Dimes.
Ooh.
Okay.
And it's weird because it looks like he's starting to figure it out a little bit. You see the offense. And really, they only lost 2 games.
Yeah, well, they're 2-3-1. Yeah.
Well, 2-3-1. So like that half is kind of sitting there a little bit. So they're like 2.5 wins. I mean, that's good for a team that we thought was a fire sale.
Worst team in the league last year.
Worst team in the. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But Danny Dimes here, I just think that with that defense of the Giants, I don't know if they can keep up. They haven't seen a player like Kyler Murray, and I think he can really affect them with their legs. They kind of know Betcher a little bit, because they know the system and the style in which they go against. It's going to be interesting. But on the other side, the Giants are looking at them like, hey, we win this game. We got an easy week off. Dallas and Philly's playing each other. We're only 1 back.
Right. Well, they're going to be tied with one of those two.
Right.
So who are you taking?
I'm taking the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are. I think Kyler Murray is tough to prepare for that type of offense, and they showed me a lot of grit with what they were able to do in Baltimore.
Okay, you guys are going to accuse me of kissing ass here because I've said a lot of nice things about them here. I wrote about them in the Monday Morning Quarterback. I am going to take the San Francisco 49ers to cover the 9.5 points.
Take the low-hanging fruit.
This isn't, but this is about the Niners playing well. This is also about the Redskins not being very good right now.
It's about Case Keenum.
This is about Case Keenum. This is about that offensive line without Trent Williams. I mean, Nick Bosa, Dee Ford, Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner, Solomon Thomas up against that Redskins defensive line. That Redskins offensive line, you better watch out for your buddy here. Because this thing could get ugly. 9.5 feels like a very fair number to take.
That's super fair.
Yeah, it sounds like a fair number to take the points and go with the Niners. I think the Niners blow the Redskins off the field.
One quick note. You know why they're not putting Dwayne Haskins? Because they had the number 1 defense against them last week. Then they have the number 2, then Buffalo, then Minnesota, 3 and 4. That's what the Redskins face. They don't want Dwayne Haskins to face that, right? So it makes sense. Although your friend Terry McLaurin, former Ohio State wide receiver, is a world. You should have seen him on Sunday tweeting about Terry McLaurin being a number 1 wide receiver.
Hey, I didn't see it coming, man. I'm going to admit it. I watched him at Ohio State. Big fan of him. Guy was like Matt Slater on special teams. He was the guy running down the punt, jumping in the end zone. Yeah, he was that guy. So I'm surprised he's a number 1 receiver. I mean, they do have some nice pieces. I just you look at the whole of the Redskins, and it's just this feels like a ticking time bomb.
Well, it's time to cash in that chip. They got a nice little chip. It's time to slide in. Yeah. They got Trent Williams. Listen, if they're going to have a bad season, they're going to potentially be, the 2nd overall pick or the 3rd overall pick. Just imagine what you can get there, but also being able to cash in that chip that you're going to get from Trent Williams, and you can get multiples. I mean, if Tunsil went for 2 number 1s, are you kidding me?
Tunsil went for 2 number 1s. It's very, very hard to find
tackles. I'll take a 1 and a 2 for Trent Williams.
Very, very hard to find tackles.
It's even harder to find all pro tackles.
Right. Lots of big spreads this
way to go
year.
on a limb.
Lots of big spreads this year, though, right? Like the haves, the have-nots. I feel like I'm taking the points a lot in these sorts of situations. Okay, that'll do it for this week's MMQB TV. For Bart, for Andrew, I'm Albert Breer. Enjoy Week 7, everyone.